And here we go.
It was a huge waste of time, like bringing a married guy to Vegas.
Then there's this guy, the Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
Welcome to the program. Caleb Calhoun is flying somewhere over the United States of America as, I guess, his paternal grandfather, well, his son's paternal grandfather wants to see his kid. So I guess we'll give him a day off. Jimmy Hyams fills in for Caleb Calhoun. That seems like a reasonable request. Jimmy, how about that?
Oh, yeah. You got to see the grandkids, right?
Yeah, speaking of, you're in that position.
Yes.
Gorgeous Orion. We see him on the Twitter and more, and must be pretty wild being a grandfather.
I'm loving it. He is such a joy. I took him to lunch yesterday, and a lot of people were just really having a good time with watching him and his actions. But he's been a lot of fun. We tussle a lot. I like that. I found somebody I could beat in wrestling. It took a while, but I got somebody now.
Yeah, I think I'm past the point where I could take my son, and that's and I found that out at the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Missouri. There's Springfield, Massachusetts. There's something about that spring that I can lift all day long and stay strong, but that spring, you lose that in your mid 40s. I've learned.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
I thought I was going to shoot the fadeaway and all this sort of thing. Block.
You got to take it inside and be strong.
That's absolutely right.
Be intimidated.
That's right. All right, coming up on the program, we're excited. Jimmy will be with us. We're going to talk a couple of different things, including Tennessee's basketball team. Does Jimmy agree with me that they have to be defensive driven? Also, where does Tennessee go when they need points? And then Jason Witten has been discussed as a potential candidate for the Dallas Cowboys head coaching job. And I don't think that's really going to happen. He's been a high school coach. They're in love with Dion, but we'll get into that. And a la Dion, I want to discuss with Jimmy the best athlete he's ever covered. SEC Big Ten have discussed automatic bids for the college football playoff. That seems strange. Revenue sharing news, stat of the day, and also we'll have this day in Tennessee sports history. So we're off and running. It is time for today's tough question, and is brought to you by our fantastic friend T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com.
Today's tough question. Boom. You heard that. Now take it. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.com. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Jimmy, I'm not sure how much you've consumed the way too early predictions for Tennessee's 2025 football season, but they've been all over the place. Anywhere from 7th to Mark Schlabach had them 19, and he noted that Tennessee had a lot to replace on offense, and they do. Before we get into that and what is the biggest concern for Tennessee's offense as they retool and rebuild, I want to ask you, just right now, I know it's way too early. That's why they call them that. But if you had to pick a record right now on a potential finish for Tennessee in this football season, what might it be?
Right now, based on the way this roster is constructed, and I know it'll change between now and August, I'd have to go 8-4. I just don't see the firepower on offense that they need. Defensively, I don't know that they can be quite as good. They'll be good again, but I don't know if they'll be quite as good as they were. Right off the bat, I see 3 teams that I would pick them to lose to, and that's Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. And then somebody else will get them like Arkansas did this past year, I think. So they have got a lot of work to do, in my opinion, to improve this roster between now and August. Now, we know the portal comes open again. Tennessee's going to lose more in the portal. I know there's a lot of angst from fans about how come they didn't sign more people. It's because they didn't have room on their roster. You know, they still have self-imposed either 2 or 3 scholarships. And I didn't, this isn't my work, but I read the other day where they had 81 on scholarship. Then they added 2 in the portal, took them to 83. There was no more room. So that's one of the reasons they haven't hit the portal and brought in as many as they have lost, because they went heavy with the signing class. So, but right now with this roster, Dave, I see 8-4. I don't know how different that is from you, but that's where I am right now.
I'm actually closer to, I'm at 10 right now because of the schedule. And there could be an Arkansas that creeps in there. I agree the 3 toughest games are always the 3 toughest games. Basically, they should handle Syracuse and the non-conference opponents on their schedule. I may be a little bit optimistic. And I said that based off a column that I wrote recently. I believe Nico takes a major step. And your thoughts on this, feel free to agree or disagree. I've seen enough glimpses that I still think he can be very, very good. I don't know about elite. By elite, that's getting to New York and being a Heisman finalist, in my mind. I still think he can be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I don't think he can be that good. But if you're one of the best quarterbacks in the country, top 10-ish, then you may not go to New York, but you can lead a pretty successful football team. That's what I base that off.
I remember we had a discussion last October, and part of it was, is Nico going to be a bust after there was all this Heisman talk? And I'm like, no, he's not going to be a bust. He's going to be a really good quarterback. I just didn't think he would be as a redshirt freshman. I do think he has a chance to be very good. And I thought he played well the last part of the year. I thought the second half of Alabama, he flipped a switch, and I thought he played well for the most part the rest of the year. But here's my problem. As good as I think he can be, you still have to have a supporting cast, right? So who's your lead running back? Who replaces Dylan Sampson? Is it Star Thomas, who transferred from Duke? And Dave, I don't really think this receiving core is that good. I didn't think they were that good last year. Now, can somebody make a monumental leap like Jalen Hyatt did from 2021 to 2022? Is that Chris Brazzell? Is it Mike Matthews? Is it one of the freshmen that's coming in? I don't know. But I don't see a real exceptional receiving core, which makes me think that even though I think Nico's going to be really good, he's not going to have enough help to where Tennessee can win 10 games. So that's what I'm seeing right now.
Chris says Caleb hit the transfer portal, holding out for more NIL money from Dave. That's possible. That's possible. Jimmy, let me ask you this. I'm going to make it the poll question. So I think the 3 biggest concerns on this team as a whole, but they happen to be on offense, is retooling the offensive line, the receivers that you mentioned, and finding a running back that I think will be Peyton Lewis, but we haven't seen it yet. Which of those 3, and it'll be the poll question, is the biggest concern in your mind?
Receivers.
Yeah.
And here's another part of that equation. So I mentioned somebody has to step up, right? Okay. Name me the first-year receivers that had come into Tennessee and Josh Heupel's system and blew it up and played great.
To me, that's a real concern as a whole, because it feels like these receivers come in and they're much ballyhooed and they look the part. I mean, Dante Thornton looked like Randy Moss in terms of a physical frame, and you didn't get much out of him. Brew with the injuries, but I think the inability to hit the ground running with transfers and to some extent incoming freshmen like Mike Matthews in this offense is troublesome if I'm a Tennessee fan.
I agree with you. And now I will say this, the one exception to what I'm saying is, if I remember this correctly, I think Brew McCoy caught 52 passes in 2022, his first year. And then last year, 2023 he got hurt. And then last year, I'm not sure he ever was quite the receiver he was from 2022. Other than that, Thornton was a disappointment. Javonte Payton caught 6 touchdown passes, but he caught like 18 passes the whole year. So that's not hugely impactful to me.
Are you suggesting there may have been some manufacturing of production a la Ethan Davis in lesser games to keep guys happy? Are you suggesting that?
No, I'm just saying they weren't that good.
Okay, that's worse.
Well, here's a part of that too, and maybe this is a system flaw, but the quarterback has to do an awful lot of reading in Tennessee's system, right? Well, so do the receivers.
Amen.
And if the receivers are not on the same page with the quarterback, it's going to lead to incompletions or even worse, interceptions. So that's why I'm just not that fired up in thinking that a newcomer at receiver, and they brought in Amari Jefferson. I just don't see a newcomer at receiver coming into Tennessee and lighting it up. Now, and I'm basing that on history. Obviously, sometimes history can be rewritten, and we'll see if Tennessee can do that. But I'm not optimistic we're going to see a much improvement out of a receiving corps that I thought was hugely disappointing this past season.
Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. It's on the YouTube page if you would like to vote there. Biggest concern on offense, is it offensive line, wide receiver, or running back? Again, today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, banksandjones.com.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones.
Jimmy, let me flip-flop the question on you just for a second.
Hey,
if I
can I
may.
interrupt just for a second?
Sir.
The NCAA should hire Banks & Jones. They should. Because right now, they're getting nothing out of their attorney. So anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's absolutely true. I like that. Jimmy, what the three, which do you feel most confident in? Just on the hoof, which John Chavis used to always love to say, which means basically just looking at an athlete and seeing little bitty things, but not really in a game. I really do like Peyton Lewis. I really am high on him. He hasn't done anything yet, but just as a guy who's covered a lot of recruiting, when I see him, and I've stood next to him before, I think this guy, and I've seen little spurts on the field, I think this guy can be really good.
Well, if Arn sharpens Arn, then I think that he's got a chance to be really good. I think Deshaun Bishop's a nice running back, but I see him as an RB2. As far as Star Thomas coming in, this was a guy that was kind of under the radar. He goes to New Mexico State, by the way, which seems to produce good players, right?
Yes.
And then last year at Duke, he had a really good year. And so I think he's going to help them. But I have seen flashes of Peyton Lewis that make me think he can be a really nice running back. I think he's not as quick or as fast as Sampson. So darting through the hole in Tennessee's system, I don't see him doing that. I think he won't have as many 15 to 20-yard runs or more as Sampson, but he could power his way for 4 to 6-yard runs. So I do think he can be a good running back, and it'll be a little bit different from what they're used to. And one reason I say this is I noticed that he just doesn't have great speed as a kickoff return guy, right? Mm-hmm. So he's not a speed back. He's more of a power back. Maybe in the offseason he can gain a step. I don't know. But I do like Lewis, and I think Star Thomas and Deshaun Bishop will battle for the number 2 spot. But I just can't see them being as good at running back because Dylan Sampson just had a historical year for Tennessee, statistically the best year in history for a Tennessee running back.
I'm going to play the flip side for a second. I think a lot of his yards were about the offensive line. A lot of his yards were about defenses playing the pass. I look at like Travis Stevens, for instance. This is not a rip on Travis Stevens, but I think a lot of tailbacks could have done what he did. And there's some similarities there in the fact that they're both quick. They both put their foot in the ground and go. And I respect that. But physically, I believe Peyton Lewis will be an upgrade. I realize I'm really projecting here after the season he had, but I don't think it was extraordinary, but I don't think it was inordinate given what Tennessee had elsewhere. In other words, I think the door was open to have a season like that. Is that fair?
I don't think you're giving Sampson enough credit.
That's fair.
No, I'll say this, and history will prove one of us right or wrong, I guess. I don't think Peyton Lewis will gain 1,000 yards.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That might replace our poll question on YouTube. I tend to. Peak IV hydration in South Knoxville and Sevierville. Live life to your fullest. Hydrate, rejuvenate, and elevate your health with Peak IV hydration. It's peakivhydration.com. Peakivhydration.com. It must be, though, if you're a Tennessee fan listening to this, and we sound a little gloom and doomy, but it must be nice for Josh Heupel to come into a season and truly know what he has at quarterback, because he went into last season and he had a good feel for it. I know he's incredibly confident, but Tennessee, from a quarterback standpoint, which is the most important position on the field, is in good shape as compared to the rest of the SEC.
I would agree with that. They're in good shape for Tennessee going forward. I think they're in better shape than they were going into the 2023 season, because I think Nico is going to be a better college quarterback than Joe Milton was. So, I think they're in good shape. I haven't perused the rest of the SEC at quarterback. Usually there's some players that step up and end up playing pretty well. I mean, I didn't really know anything about the guy at South Carolina, and Lenore Sellers ended up having a heck of a year. I don't like Alabama necessarily at quarterback. Auburn, we'll see. They're bringing in Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma, and he didn't impress. So, Tennessee should be in pretty good shape compared to the rest of the league. And I think that Nico, if he has any help, is going to have a really good year. But I still go back to this. He's got to have these receivers come through. And here's my one other thing on Peyton Lewis, while I don't think you get 1,000. Because as I mentioned earlier, he's not a guy that's going to break off a lot of 15, 20, 40, 50-yard runs. He's not fast enough. So I think that's going to curtail his total rushing yards this season.
I think his top end might be a little bit better from what I've been told than what you're giving him, but I completely agree with the quickness. And getting back to Nico, I'm going to make a goofy comparison because we're both old and we both followed the Cowboys. I'm sure you remember Troy Aikman's rookie year, talking about Nico here. I'm not comparing them as players, but
1 in 15.
That's right. And he didn't win the one game. Steve Walsh won that.
That's right.
And so that's going back a little bit. But I remember John Madden saying at the time, and I was thinking the very same thing as I guess an 17, 18-year-old. I was like, I see glimpses to believe with some protection he can be really good. So while I'm projecting, I do believe there's something there in Nico.
Yeah, but again, I go back to this. He needs some help. Yep. Aikman became a lot better when he had Michael Irvin and Alvin Harper and some of those guys. Was it Jay Norvac? Who was the tight end? Have I got that right?
Novacek.
Yeah. So he got better with the receivers and the system and the experience and all those things. Well, those are the same things that Nico's going to have. Now, I will be wrong about Nico's production if Chris Brazzell comes through, if Matthews ends up being really good, if Amari Jefferson comes through. If to me, they just have a lot of question marks at receiver. They don't have a receiver returning other than Brazzell that's caught 10 passes in their career in college. So at Tennessee. So I'm not. That's not a knock on Nico. That is a concern about the system and the players surrounding him. And so that's why I'll be curious to see if Tennessee averages more points per year this year than they did last year. Now, last year was inflated because you can check me on this. I think Tennessee averaged 62 points a game in non-conference games because of the cupcake schedule.
Right.
In SEC games, it was closer to 26 or 27, right?
Mm-hmm.
They need to be over 30 points a game in conference play. Can they do that? If the receivers come through and if Peyton Lewis comes through, the answer is yes. But I do have concerns about the wideouts.
I do like getting your perspective because you rub elbows with a lot of fans, a lot of donors. to me, the non-conference schedule is troublesome as a consumer, and I don't need to see Tennessee play Kent State. And I'm not just talking about Tennessee, Jimmy. I'm talking about across the board. It seems like college football, there's 4 or 5 at least gimme games on each opponent's schedule. My contention is with a playoff, you don't need that anymore. But I do think, on the flip side, it influences and pushes people to keep that easy schedule to get into the playoff. But just like the NFL, you go 9-7, or what would it be, 10-7, however many games they play now. You go 10-7 and you get in the playoffs. It doesn't really matter what you did, but just from sitting down, being with the fam, watching a game, Kent State and some of those games are just horrendous.
They are. And I think if you're going to charge the prices that Tennessee charges and that other schools charge, by the way, Penn State also played Kent State. If you're going to charge that much money to go to watch a football game, give the fans a better product, not the media. You shouldn't care about that. You should care about the paying public, what they're, if they're forking over a lot of money to buy a ticket, for concessions, for parking, and then you go over there and watch Kent State or UT Chattanooga or UTEP, wasn't that the other one? I mean, come on. You got to get them better. Now, here's the flip side of that. Everybody's going to play at least 1 or 2 of those games because everybody wants to try to get 8 home games for revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And so now if you go away from playing some of those, you got to go home and home. If you want to play just Indiana, you're going to have to go home and home with them. If you want to play UCLA, it's going to have to be home and home. To LSU's credit, they played UCLA and Southern Cal, and they're home and home. So if you want to do that, so you're going to lose a home game when you do it. But gosh, I wish Tennessee would upgrade their schedule. Don't play the team that's ranked 134 in the FBS. At least play a team that's ranked 60th or 70th, like Marshall. Marshall was 9-3. Okay. At least play somebody that's not going to go 1-11 or 0-12 and get outscored by 400 points in a season. So that's disappointing to me about Tennessee football is the schedule, and they need to upgrade it. Now, on the flip side of that, and I'm not saying you got to go out and play Ohio State or teams like that every week, but just give somebody that's got at least somewhat of a name and somewhat competitive. But the one thing I didn't like about the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, they did not reward you for playing a good strength of schedule.
Nope. They did
and
not.
So now schools are looking at that and saying, well, why should I play a better strength of schedule? The committee has spoken. Go 11-1, and I'm going to get seated really high. Go 10-2, and I'm in. And if you go 9-3 against the best schedule in the country, that team's not getting in. That's what the committee said. So I don't like that message. And it also leads me to this, too. The SEC is not going to go to 9 games, right? They're going to stick at 8. If the committee said strength of schedule matters, I think the SEC might have gone to 9. But when they say it doesn't, then they don't want to beat up on each other. So that was another thing about the committee that I didn't like, because as not just a media member, but as a fan of football, I want to see more conference games, in particular in the SEC. And I'm afraid we're not going to see that.
I agree with that. This day in Tennessee sports history, and it's brought to you by Ted Russell Ford Lincoln. I get to shop for my Bronco this weekend. I'm excited. The buying process is absolutely perfected at Ted Russell Ford Lincoln, a proud member of the community. You will love driving off the lot in your new vehicle, new or used, and they have an incredible selection as the #1 overall Ford and Lincoln dealer in East Tennessee. This day in Tennessee sports history brought to you by Ted Russell Ford Lincoln.
Well, Ted, looks like you're settling right into your new space.
Affirmative. Powered by the new Ford Lightning.
You know, that would be incredible for camping, tailgating. The options are unlimited. Why don't you take a little power for yourself, buddy?
Beep boop beep bop.
Get into this new 2024 Ford F-150 Power Boost for only $53,300, or get 0% for 72 months on a Ford F-150 Lightning. Come see us today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or Kingston Pike. All
right, there you go. So, Jimmy, this day in Tennessee sports history, 9 years ago, on January the 23rd, the Vols beat South Carolina 78-69. It was the first top 25 win of the Rick Barnes era at Tennessee. Hard to believe that it's been 10 years. South Carolina was ranked number 24 at the time. When you look back over Rick Barnes' near decade as a Tennessee head basketball coach, first, it's flown by. Second, your thoughts. How would you evaluate that? I'd probably give it a B plus. And knowing that he struggled to make the Final Four coming in, if I wanted to take that into consideration, I could probably even go an A or A minus. How would you grade his decade at Tennessee?
I'd go A minus. When he took over, they weren't very good, right?
Right.
And he had his first few years, they weren't very good either. They struggled. And what was left by Donnie Tyndall and the NCAA and all that mess, it was hard. And I do remember when Rick Barnes took over, some people call him Rocking Chair Rick because they thought he was just coming here to go through the motions. And I remember interviewing him the day before he coached the first game at Tennessee. I said, do you have extra motivation because Texas fired you? He said, no. He said, I never lost the fire in my belly. He said, I'm as motivated now as ever. But he said, I was not unmotivated at Texas. I wanted to win there just as much. So that does not impact the fuel in my tank at all. Now, I think he's done an excellent job. The last, 6 or so years, they've been really good. No, he's not made it to the Final Four. Finally, they broke through under him and got to the Elite Eight. But what he's done with this program, they're selling out a lot of games. They have a lot of great moments in the regular season, a lot of great moments, a lot of fun games to watch in the regular season. They do need to improve a little bit in postseason overall under Rick Barnes, but I would give him an A minus because of where that program is now and how they are constantly in the top 15 in the polls and have been for the last few years.
It's tough. We're going to continue with Tennessee basketball. Where does Tennessee go when they absolutely need points? I think of Tennessee's playing Auburn, of course, on Saturday. I think of the Auburn game last year. Where did they go when they were struggling to score? A guy named Dalton Connect, and they were fine. I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. So we'll get into that. It'll be what the H, because I think this is pretty much turned into a defensive team, which maybe we should have expected. Portions of the program brought to you by Quality Tire Pros, serving Chattanooga's community since 1957. All major brands of tires, full-service automotive, brakes, alignments, oil changes, and more. QualityTirePros.com. QualityTirePros.com. Stop by and tell Bo that Dave and Off the Hook Sports said, hey, Bo. All right, so hang tight. We're going to get to some Tennessee basketball next. Why the Vols are going to be a defensive-driven team, a la Rick Barnes' previous 30 years in coaching. By the way, you mentioned the name, Donnie Tyndall. So it's been a decade since Rick Barnes was hired. Speaking of a guy that should have called Banks and Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. Other attorneys say they'll go to trial. They won't. They'll settle. But isn't his show cause up soon?
Gosh, I don't know.
I thought he had a 10-year, so I think it's up. And everybody I talked to respected his basketball mind. It wouldn't stun me if he got a decent job.
You didn't ask me to give a grade on him at Tennessee.
No, that was incomplete.
No, I think an F.
Yeah,
I think he committed so darn many violations, and he was so underhanded with a lot of the things that he did. He has been coaching some at various places. I don't know if somebody's going to give him another chance or not. Maybe at a lower level they might. It's possible. But and what would it have looked like if he had stayed at Tennessee? It certainly wouldn't have been as good as what Rick Barnes has done, in my opinion. Wouldn't have been even close. But that was unfortunate for Tyndall, because when I met him and visited with him, I liked the guy. But my goodness, Tennessee didn't have much choice in firing him after all the things he did.
The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, as we broadcast live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, East Tennessee's largest volume dealer. Great buying experience, but the largest volume dealer with Ford or Lincoln. So they'll have what you need. 2 minutes, Tennessee Hoops up next. Please hit the like button. Be sure you have subscribed. Jimmy Hyams sitting in for Caleb Calhoun. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Hey Ted, it's time to save some cash during New Year's Bash.
Savings is my prime directive. Let's see what you got, Nick.
Right now, you can save up to $10,000 on new Ford F-150s. Beat that, Ted.
Most impressive, but how about 0% for 72 months on Ford Lightning or Ford Mustang Mach-E?
Ted Russell Ford has huge savings on whatever you're looking for.
This checks out.
Come see us today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or Kingston Pike, or online at tedrussellford.net.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Neubert Collision Center.
Having been in the jewelry industry for a long time in the Knoxville community, I saw a need for a jeweler, a real jeweler.
Our ability to do these designs has really been based on the customers bringing new things in and challenging us as a store. Our goal is not to tell anybody what they want. Our goal is to listen to what they want and then help them get there.
Schedule your consultation today to get your special someone the perfect custom gift just in time for the holidays.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air. Dare to compare.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beat. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping.
A guy with a lot of jobs, but this one is the most important.
This is not government work. As such, I treat it with care and attention.
Until someone else calls. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer. Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
Jimmy Hyams filling in for Caleb Calhoun, who was nice enough to set everything up, because that wouldn't have gone well in Dave's world. I can promise you that. Hit the like and subscribe button and get on board now. Donnie Tyndall, we just predicted will be the next head coach at Kentucky. No, we didn't do that. All right, but that is a funny name. Just a funny character, I guess. I'll be interested to see where his career ends up. How much money did he end up pulling away from Tennessee, Jimmy? Do you remember?
I don't. And some of those get a little murky because Tennessee has fired coaches for cause and not paid them, like Jeremy Pruitt. That would have been $12.6 million, and they saved that because of the NCAA violations. So I don't really remember how much they had to pay Donnie Tyndall, if at all. I don't recall.
Yeah, I think that I was told, correct me if I'm wrong, that they negotiated down Bruce Pearl's buyout, and who Tennessee plays on Saturday, and he got about $1.6 million.
Bruce Pearl?
Yes.
No, he got a little under $1 million.
Okay.
He got about $950,000.
Okay. I was told, correct me if I'm wrong, that he said this is for your entire staff, and he said, I'll take it.
Okay. That's not exactly what I was told.
Okay.
So here's what I believe, and this came from one of the assistants that was involved. Bruce Pearl went in to negotiate his settlement, and Tennessee ended up paying him more than they really needed or had to because of the success he had. But he negotiated only for himself, and he did not negotiate to help his assistants get any money. And that's one reason some of those assistants are not thrilled with Bruce Pearl. That's what I was told, and that came from one of the assistants.
All right, it's time for What the H, and it's brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry, a Tennessee tradition. RickTerryJewelry.com. RickTerryJewelry.com.
What the H?
Wow,
I've never worked hard on anything. What a cool life.
For real? The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer. Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
Jimmy, I was told that Tennessee was just going to replace Dalton Connect with a similar score in Chaz Lanier and just hit the ground running and everything was going to be fine. And then I was told that Tennessee would be better in scoring because they had 3 very good scores instead of 1 great score. And I guess, I think I'll listen to that for a second, but it didn't sound quite right. And now, sure enough, here we are with Tennessee is a defensive-minded team that I think is going to struggle to score at times, which is about as Rick Barnesian can be.
Yeah, there were initial thoughts about Dalton Connect versus Chaz Lanier, and Lanier can score. And I thought it was interesting that Rick Barnes said that Lanier is a better pure shooter, which means basically he's saying he's a better three-point shooter than Connect. However, Chaz Lanier cannot take it to the basket and score like Dalton Connect. He can't take over a game like Connect did against Auburn a year ago at Thompson Bowling Arena, where Connect was unstoppable in the second half. If you had designed that play against Vanderbilt like you did for Chaz Lanier, and it was for Connect, he doesn't have that shot blocked. He scores. Lanier is not nearly as good taking it to the rim as Dalton Connect was. Now, he's not quite as tall, but I don't think he's as physical either. And so I think they miss Dalton Connect a lot. Who do they go to for a basket? It probably still is Chaz Lanier, but I'm not sure that I would design something for him now to take it to the rim because he's not the finisher that Connect was. So if I got an outside shot that I got to make, it's Lanier. But you also don't have anybody inside, in my opinion, that you can dump it down to and score. It's not Akpor. Akpor scores off of offensive rebounds and alley-oops off pick and rolls. Now he hit a 3 the other day, which was kind of a miraculous shot, but you don't have anybody you can dump it down to and say, go get me a basket near the basket. That player doesn't exist. It's not Milicic, who, by the way, had an awful game the other night, and Tennessee won over Mississippi State anyway. But I question, other than Lanier from outside, I question who else. Now, Ziegler, he can hit a 3, but he's not consistent outside. He also is a very good penetrator, but at 5'9", you're going to get some shots blocked by some 6'10" guys inside going to the basket. So I think there is a concern about who you go to, other than I would go to Lanier on the perimeter shot. Other than that, I don't know where you go.
Yeah, and it would be all about perimeter defense if I'm playing Tennessee, and I've got a couple of days to prepare for them in the NCAA tournament because of what you said as far as Tennessee's threat in the interior offensively. You mentioned Ziegler's height. The other thing that I wonder if you've noticed, Chaz Lanier seems to shoot it out a little bit in front of his body and kind of push it. That's very blockable. I know he's taller than most of the guys he's going to go against. I think that could be a real flaw in his game, not just this year, but I think NBA scouts are going to see that and think that's troublesome.
Well, he offsets that with how quickly he releases the ball.
Right.
Steph Curry shoots it low, but
True.
He is so quick to get rid of the ball that you can overcome that, I think. Even in the NBA, I know you're going to say, well, they're better athletes up there. Yeah, well, they're better athletes trying to guard Steph Curry and they can't do it. So that one doesn't bother me as much, but you are right. He does shoot it low and at front, which you would think would be more. It certainly would be blockable if he did not have the quick release. So, and I don't know how many shots has he had blocked on the perimeter?
Not many.
Yeah.
Not many, to your point.
Now, when he takes it inside, he does.
Yep.
But outside he hasn't. So I think you can get away with that. Now I'll say this: Meshack has started to come around a little bit with his offensive game, and he needs to, because Dave, you in basketball with Tennessee, if you want to play at an elite level, you can't go on the court with 3 guys that you think can score, with Ziegler, with Lanier and Milicic, and have 2 guys that are non-factors on offense other than alley-oops, which would be Ikpora, and Meshack. So Meshack has come around some with his offensive game. He went 5 for 5 the other night. And he's capable of being more of an offensive threat than he is. He changed his shot. He had injured his little finger against MTSU December 23rd. And he just was horrible shooting the ball. He finally changed his shot. And in recent games, he has been more accurate with his shooting. But he needs to be an offensive threat for Tennessee to play at an optimum level. And here's something that it surprised me a lot. I don't know if this will surprise you. But last night I'm watching Seth Greenberg, and he said there are 5 teams in the SEC that are really dangerous that I think can make some noise in the NCAA tournament. He said the top 3 are Florida, Alabama, and Auburn. He mentioned 2 others, which were Kentucky, and I can't remember the other one. He didn't even mention Tennessee as one of the top 5 teams in the SEC as far as a threat in the NCAA tournament. That surprised me a lot.
I'll be honest, it didn't surprise me, Jimmy. I mean, I didn't hear the comment, but it doesn't surprise me, I should say. I watched that basketball team. I've watched them closely. You know, you kind of get through football season, and we've had some recruiting and that sort of thing. So that's been my main focus. Caleb's been all over basketball. For the past couple of weeks, though, I've really zoned in. I've got back and watched some games. And I just I don't see where they go for points when they have to have it. It's going to be Chaz Lanier. I wonder if you gave Rick Barnes truth serum, Jimmy, and he said, you said, are you pleased with what Lanier's brought to the table, or are you a little bit disappointed? What do you think he would say?
I think he'd say he's pleased.
Okay.
Because I don't think in his mind he ever thought this guy was going to replace Connett. And as Barnes pointed out, I don't know these exact numbers, but he said the first year that Lanier, and who was not heavily recruited out of high school at all, out of Nashville Innsworth, his first year at North Florida, he averaged about 2.4 points. And then he averaged 4.7. And then he averaged 19.7. That's an incredible jump. So he went from being unrecruited out of high school to being one of the top players in the portal. But I don't think he ever envisioned him completely replacing Connett. Yes, would he be a good offensive player? I think they thought he could come in and maybe average 16 a game, and he's averaging more than that. So I think they're pleased with what they've got. What they got to do is get more out of Milicic, and they got to get more out of Meshack, and they got to get more out of Dubar. Those are the ones that got to get more production from, and that would help ease some of the pressure from Lanier.
Well, let me ask you the same question as far as if you gave him truth serum. We'll go ahead and make it hot or cold. Brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. 50 years in East Tennessee. City Heating and Air Conditioning. cityheatandair.com. So, Jimmy, do you think Rick Barnes, you just said he's pleased, so I would think he would be hot to fit the format of the bit. And so I would think he'd be hot on Lanier. I know that Darlington Dubar has dealt with a personal issue I really don't want to get into necessarily. I would think if you held his feet to the fire, he's probably a little bit cold on Dubar and what he's done. What do you think?
Yes.
Okay.
And they need Dubar. They need him. They need him for 2 key reasons, in my opinion. One, they need him just to be able to score coming off the bench and give them some more firepower, because this team does not have, in my opinion, a lot of really good scores. They're a bit inconsistent in that regard. And Dubar is capable of that. When he was at Hofstra, I think he averaged like 17 points a game. Here's the other thing, too. Tennessee's not deep. And Dubar would be like the 8th guy in the rotation, okay? Because you got Phillips coming off the bench, you got Gainey coming off the bench. Dubar's been in and out of the lineup, in and out of games, and so forth. It's hard to go 7 deep and win at a high level. They need Dubar for his production, and they need him for team depth. They need some minutes out of him. They need productive minutes out of him. So I think he's one of the keys to this team. Not that he's a great player, but I think great teams fill in pieces with production, and I think that's where he would fit in. And so I think he's a big part of whether or not this team is going to reach its potential.
Nope. So we'll play a little bit of hot or cold here, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. We greatly appreciate them. cityheatandair.com. 50 years in East Tennessee. Integrity matters. They're an absolute difference maker. Hot or cold, brought to you by City Heat and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com. So let's continue with the format. As far as Igor Milicic, do you think that Rick Barnes is hot or cold compared to what he thought he was getting with Igor? And I just love saying the name Igor.
I think Barnes would be hot on Igor. And one thing is, and I think they got more out of this than they anticipated, he leads the team in rebounding. I mean, he had like a 15 rebound game the other day. I don't think they thought that he would rebound at this level. And to me, rebounding comes down to three key things. One is effort. I think another one is positioning, which includes boxing out, which very few players do nowadays. And the other one is anticipation, your ability to see a shot, whether it's going to be long or short or how it's going to bounce off the rim. He has done an excellent job on the boards. Now, I think they're disappointed in his shooting. Here's a guy that came in that was a 35, 38% three-point shooter. And I haven't looked lately, but the last time I did look, he was making 25% from three. That's not what you thought you were getting with him. And he was going to be that stretch four. Rick Barnes has not had a player in the 6'8" to 6'10" range that could be a power forward and go out and hit threes. And that's what they thought they were getting. And he has hit some threes, but he has not shot with the accuracy that they thought. But because of his rebounding, I'm going to say they're hot on him, but they certainly would like to see him be a more accurate three-point shooter.
I have a suggestion that's hot or cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning for our European viewers. And that is, if you know a young man who might be pretty good at basketball, he's in the 6'10" range, and he just likes to stand outside and shoot threes all day long, show him a tape of Kevin McHale. I think there is a void. I seriously do. I think there is a void, and we've talked about interior offense twice in two different topics, but I think there's a void that an offensive player with his back to the basket that could get a deuce pretty much every time. I think there's a place for that person in the NBA instead of always facing the basket and shooting threes and stuff.
Nikola Jokic, a two-time MVP of the NBA, and it seems like every year he's in the top three in the voting. Is it going to be Jokic or is it going to be Embiid? Is it going to be Jokic or is it going to be Kevin Durant? Jokic or somebody? It's always Jokic and somebody else right now as far as the best player in the NBA on a yearly. And here's a guy that can score inside, even though I think his vertical jump is like an 8, but he can score inside and he can hit a 3. But most of the damage that he does is inside, but he can go out and hit the 3. Boy, you would love for Milicic to fit that role. A guy that scored inside first and then went out and shot threes. But a lot of the big men that come from Europe are more enamored with shooting outside and not being physical inside. But and to your point, I think Milicic needs to become a better inside scorer because Tennessee, in my opinion, certainly has a void there.
Yep. Hot or cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com. I think most 17-year-olds are cold on playing like Kevin McHale. They like stepping out and shooting the three. City Heating and Air Conditioning, 50 years in East Tennessee.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
There's your best. All right, Jimmy, our stat of the day brought to you by Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia daily updates. Go to facebook.com, Sports Treasures TN, Sports Treasures TN. Tennessee's basketball team is 17-6 in its last 23 games against top 15 opponents dating back to December 22nd, 2021. Jimmy, that's pretty good.
It's very good. Very good. I wonder, I don't know the answer to this. I would bet you there are not 3 teams in the SEC that have a better record against the top 15 opponents than Tennessee over that time frame. Rick Barnes has done a great job of getting his team ready to play in those games. Some of those are home games. Some of those are road games. Some of those are neutral site games. But they've been really good wherever it is. And so that's a great record. Now, every now and then they will play like they're in a septic tank, like they did in Gainesville against Florida. But those are rare. But it happens every now and then. It happens to a lot of teams that occurs to. So that record against top 15 is outstanding. And it's one reason that I think that Rick Barnes is the best men's basketball coach Tennessee's ever had.
Strong statement. Let's roll with that. Let me think back, though, for a second. It's not a fantastic lineage. Would it just be Rick Barnes and Ray Mears? Rick Barnes
and Bruce Pearl.
And Bruce Pearl.
Those three.
Well, let's don't forget about that guy. What about Jerry Green? Does he get some love?
No.
No, he does not.
No, he does not. And I think this is a little bit unfair. Ray Mears never won an NCAA tournament game, but it was also an era when there were like 18 teams that were invited. And if you got in the tournament, you were likely going to play a top 8 team. Syracuse was outstanding one year when they beat them. They lost to VMI one year under Mears, and Bernard King didn't play. So he never won an NCAA tournament game. And I know that's held against him, and I understand that. But sometimes I think there's too much emphasis put on it. He would have won some games if he had a field of 68. When you go to Bruce Pearl, if he had done it longer at Tennessee, maybe he's the guy that goes down as the greatest. But he shot himself in the foot and got fired. But I will give him a lot of credit for reviving the program at the time that he came in, of making a basketball game at Tennessee an event, not just a game, but an event. You wanted to be there. And he showed the potential of what this program could be. And even though there was a glitch in between, Rick Barnes took over, and he has also shown what a great atmosphere Thompson Bowling can be.
Jimmy, I tend to think that, and I think that Tuesday was the 10-year anniversary of Rick Barnes. I'm sorry, that would be good. Pain in his chest. A Bruce Pearl pain in his chest. At least I saw that on PTI. I think he should be forever remembered as the coach that took basketball as something to do and turned it into the thing to do this time of year. And I don't know that Tennessee will ever need that void filled again, because it's something now. Rick Barnes isn't that exciting, but who cares? You just care about the win-loss record and how they're playing. But to me, he was Bruce Pearl will always be, aside from what happened on the basketball court, which is good, was a very important figure in Tennessee athletics.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I know a lot of people soured on him by the way it ended, but what he did for the program, and ironically, the signature win that he had early in his career came at Texas against Rick Barnes.
Mm-hmm.
When they went on the road, if memory serves, I think it was like 92-75. And Chris Lofton was pouring in threes, and C.J. Watson was playing great, and so was Dane Bradshaw. But that kind of told everybody that was a Tennessee fan, this guy's for real, and this system can work. And so he did a tremendous job. He's a great game day coach. He did another phenomenal job, I thought, of identifying his own players' strengths and playing to them. And I hope he's not offended by this, but Dane Bradshaw was never going to be a good point guard in the SEC. But he moved into power forward, and he became a glue guy and a really good, productive college player. That's because Bruce Pearl saw in a 6'4" Dane Bradshaw that he could play power forward. And when I heard he was doing that, I thought he's nuts, but it worked out. He's got a really good eye for that. It's why he's got Auburn ranked number 1 in the country right now, is he's been able to recruit the right guys, put them in the right place to be productive. And so I think Bruce Pearl's an excellent coach. He proved it at Tennessee, and he's proving it now at Auburn.
Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards. Go to hemphousechat.com. hemphousechat.com. Use the promo code HOOK for 10% off. That's HOOK for 10% off. So I heard something absolutely bizarre on the Dan Patrick show that we're going to dig into. I covered Jason Witten. I think a lot of Jason Witten, both as a man and as a football player, but I don't think he's ready to be head coach of the Cowboys quite yet. We'll discuss that. And then Deion Sanders could get that job. So I just want to dig in with Jimmy during his career. I think that Deion is probably considered by a lot of people one of the most elite athletes to play sports. And I would argue he's one of the 2 best athletes that I've seen, along with Bo Jackson, second to Bo. But we'll get Jimmy's thoughts on the best athletes that he's ever covered, just raw athletes while at Tennessee. Again, the show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, as we broadcast live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios. Give me 2 minutes back with Jimmy Hyams off the Hook Sports.
Well, Ted, looks like you're settling right into your new space.
Affirmative. Powered by the new Ford Lightning.
You know, that would be incredible for camping, tailgating. The options are unlimited. Why don't you take a little power for yourself, buddy?
Beep boop beep bop.
Get into this new 2024 Ford F-150 Power Boost for only $53,300, or get 0% for 72 months on a Ford F-150 Lightning. Come see us today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or Kingston Pike, or online at tedrussellford.net.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Community banking is about location and much more. It's about family. We reside in your community. We are a part of your community. At Commercial Bank, our commitment extends beyond the walls of our branches. It's displayed each day in the opportunities we provide, the money we give back, and the time we commit, all to help improve the lives of the people, families, and businesses that make our communities great. Commercial Bank, life made better.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire prevention.
With our brand new location on Emory Road, Eye Care Optical is bringing East Tennessee's best eye care to your neighborhood. Doctors Johnston and Combs offer unmatched expertise and care without a trip to Knoxville. Eye Care Optical, now in Powell.
Are you ready to get strong? At NFC, we offer top-notch weight training and functional fitness, so you can build strength and improve your performance. Join today at nfc1.com or stop by any one of our 7.
Frank, like the name, but serious or something. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun, represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Jimmy. So one of my strongest memories of covering practice, a Tennessee football practice, which I counted up, and I think I've covered roughly 5 million football practices in my life, and I'm so glad they're closed now. But anyway.
Some from restrooms.
That's not true. That was not me. Rumor was spread. I think it was Griffith, actually, and somebody got us confused, which is a shame for Mike because I was super fat at the time. I do not know where that came from, but people dropped little hints that I watched practice through a restroom across the street at Stokely.
Yes.
I've tried for years to figure out where in the world that came from. I think I used that restroom 2 times because it was close to the sports information department. But when it comes down to it, in all honesty, how much do you actually glean from practice? I know that you were doing afternoons, so you couldn't go when they had afternoons, afternoon practices. It was basically roll call. And then you couldn't report like Jason Witten lining up wide, which I accidentally reported while working for Jimmy as a receiver. You had to run that by Philip Fulmer. How much time was wasted out of a typical hour that you might pick up one little bitty nugget?
Well, probably a lot. I always went with something in mind about what I wanted to watch, what I wanted to focus on. Maybe it was going to be the cornerbacks one day. Maybe it was going to be the tackles one day. I do remember going to practice one time and I watched Tennessee. They got a field goal blocked by Alabama and Terrence Cody. And then the next practice, they had a bunch of defensive linemen that were in the pass protection for field goal units. So you could pick up nuggets here or there if you really paid attention. A lot of it, though, was boring. I'll say that. But I like watching some of the early practices in particular because you could then look at some of the freshmen that you had not seen. How good of an athlete is this guy? How good? With the first time I saw Cam Sutton at cornerback, I'm thinking this guy was a 3-star? Boy, they misevaluated this kid because I knew he was good from the start. So that part of it I like, but boy, there was a lot of monotony to practice.
I think maybe I'm thinking of the Vanderbilt and Kentucky week at the end of the year when you're sitting there freezing and you know the team up one side and down the other, and you're like, oh my goodness, why am I here? HoundDogs of Knoxville champions look good in orange. HDKnoxville.com, HDKnoxville.com. So, Jimmy, I was going to share one of my all-time favorite moments, and it was covering practice. It was interviewing Jason Witten, who might be a candidate for the Cowboys job. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but anyway, I remember interviewing him the day that they had moved him from defensive end to tight end, which was it his grandfather / coach? Because I know his dad wasn't necessarily involved. But yes. Okay, and he was going immediately. It's 4 cell phones. Is how old I am. But it's 4 cell phones, and he's going back to call him. And I remember the interview went something like this. I said, all right, so you, Jason, have been moved to tight end. He goes, I know. And I said, Jason, so are you aware that there's not a rich heritage of tight ends catching passes at the school? And there wasn't at the time. He goes, I know. And Jimmy, I said, do you realize that the record, I may have this wrong, for most catches in a season by a tight end was 22? And he goes, I know. That ended up being a massively good move for Jason Witten. But let's go back. What did you think at the time? Because I thought if you don't transfer, this is going to work out. But I thought he might transfer even without the transfer portal. What did you think of that move at the time?
I didn't think that the move would have the impact that it did. I wasn't sure that Jason Witten would be a great defensive end.
Agreed.
I thought I saw a guy that I thought, okay, this is somebody that could be productive. He's not Sean Ellis, so he wasn't going to elevate to that role. And when they moved him to tight end, I was a little bit like you and him during the interview. Tennessee did not have a lot of production from the tight end position, and so they're moving a guy to that spot. Now, later on, I know that Philip Fulmer took a lot of flack from Jason Witten and others about that, but and Philip Fulmer said, I sure made that guy a lot of money. Well, he did. And in retrospect, he did. So I didn't think it would have the impact that it did. Good for Jason Witten. He was a fantastic tight end, a very good tight end at Tennessee, a great tight end in the NFL, and really happy for what he was able to accomplish because I think he's just a great person.
Yeah, and if you go back during that time period, I think making it work for Jason was a big deal for Tennessee's in-state recruiting. Had they taken a guy that was really beloved on a lot of different levels and it not worked out, I think it could have affected Tennessee's recruiting under Philip Fulmer down the road.
It certainly could have. And schools would have used that against them. And that happened. And look, that happens sometimes. You can go out and recruit a really good player from a school. He goes to Tennessee. He's not productive. And that coach is like, I don't know if I want to send any more players to that school again. Or you can have players at a school and you don't recruit them and they go off and play great, like Patrick Willis did Ole Miss. And that school's like, I'm not going to send anybody to Tennessee. They wouldn't even take a great player. So sometimes that in-state recruiting can be kind of dicey. But if you move a player that was a blue chip prospect and you move him around and he's not productive, then that could certainly do a lot of harm. And maybe more in East Tennessee than West Tennessee, right?
Yes.
But certainly in that area, it could have a negative impact on recruiting.
Okay, so Jason is now the head football coach at Liberty Christian School in Argyle, Texas. And I've put together these lists before of several times, as a matter of fact, potential replacements for a coach, whether it be Dooley, Butch, whoever, Lane, whoever. And really the initial lists that you put together are basically any name you can think of, right, Jimmy? The athletic director doesn't even know who they're going to hire at that point in a situation like Lane Kiffin. They don't. I mean, you want to have a bus list in your back pocket, but in case somebody gets hit by a bus, is what the late Mike Hamilton used to say, rest in peace. But still, I saw Jason Witten's name associated with the Cowboys job, and he may want it. It may be fantastic to be the head coach of the Cowboys, but I don't think that's the best fit for Jason Witten.
No, it's not. And I can't imagine him being ready to do that. At least Deion Sanders went from high school to the FCS level, then to Power 4 at Colorado. And look, you got to give him a lot of credit for what Colorado did this year, because he took over a program that sucked. So, but Jason Witten, to me, would not be ready for this. I remember many years ago, even from going to the college level, Notre Dame hired Jerry Faust, who was a successful coach at Cincinnati Moeller High School. He won a ton of state championships. He goes to Notre Dame. He's in over his head. He fails, and it set the Notre Dame program back years. And as much as I like Jason Witten, unless he's got a son named Shadur, who's a great quarterback, I don't see that happening. So, and I think he'd be overwhelmed as the Cowboys coach, and probably if he didn't succeed, it would probably put a little bit of taint his legacy as a Dallas Cowboy.
His son, by the way, Cooper, is, I believe, going to visit Baylor. He's announced he's received scholarship offers from SMU, TCU, Oklahoma, Oregon, Tennessee, Duke, and Missouri, in addition to Baylor. So,
what position does he play?
He is a safety. He's a safety. Oh, who knows? They may move him to tight end when he gets to Tennessee.
There you go. That's right.
Hey, guess what? You're now an offensive guard. Welcome to Knoxville. All right, so hit that like and subscribe button. Love having Jimmy on in place of Caleb Calhoun, a day off to visit family with his little baby. And I would suggest that you follow Jimmy on the Twitter, and you can see pictures of his fantastic grandson, Orion. All right, so Deion Sanders, in my opinion, is one of the two greatest athletes that I've ever laid eyes on, along with Bo Jackson. And it's Bo up here way high, and then there's a drop, and there's Deion, in my opinion, and then there's a drop to some other people. I'm curious what you think of that statement. And then, Jim, I want to get into the all-time just best raw athletes that you covered at Tennessee. So what do you make of Deion and his eliteness? He'll certainly tell you about it if you ask.
Yeah, he was an elite athlete. Anybody that can play football at a high level like that, and then I think he was an all-star with the Braves. Bo Jackson, to me, is at the higher level. It's interesting to me, and I've had this conversation with some people, not a lot. Is there a difference between being a great athlete and being extremely athletic? And when I think of athletic, I think of somebody that is fast, he's strong, he can run, he can jump, but maybe he is not a real good basketball player, or maybe he's not a real good football player. But athletically, he looks the part. And then there are people that don't look quite as fast or strong, like Ron Whitby, who lettered in 4 sports at Tennessee, was the SEC Player of the Year. He was not, I don't think, a great jumper. He didn't run a 4.5 in the 40, but he was a great athlete. So having said all that, I put the ability to be successful as an athlete in multiple sports at a higher level than just being, quote, athletic.
Okay, so I'm glad you clarified, because there's something to be said about the guy that does the right things off the field. But I want to focus on just best raw athlete. And that might be a guy who didn't have a fantastic career. But who are some of the best athletes, just raw athletes, that you covered in your time at Tennessee?
Well, so the reason I made that delineation, Stanley assumed he was a great athlete, but he wasn't any good at anything. Okay.
True.
So I don't put him in that category. So if you have to be, so all right, I'll just give you some of the players. Dale Carter. Dale Carter was a tremendous athlete. He's a great football player. He was good in basketball. Didn't play in college, but he was good in his younger years. I'll tell you, another one was a great athlete. Was Carl Pickens. Carl Pickens played both ways and had a very good NFL career. And he was a four-sport athlete in high school. You know who else was a great athlete? Heath Schuler.
Oh, yeah.
Heath Schuler recently told me that if he had a do-over, he would like to be a decathlete because he could do all those things that a decathlete does. Now, he wouldn't have made as much money in track, right? But he would love to have been a college decathlete.
I think I was the person that told him that.
I'm sorry?
I think I was the person that told him that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I said, you know what you'd have been great at is a decathlon athlete or decathlete. and he said, huh, never thought about that. There we go. You said
what an impact you had. Now, I'm going to give you one that's out of the box that I'm going to say you probably didn't think of. Justin Gatlin.
Ooh, good one.
I covered some track meets at Tennessee. I covered what at one time was the world's fastest athlete, a guy that beat Usain Bolt. So Justin Gatlin, to me, is one of the greatest athletes I've ever covered. Now, I saw Bo Jackson play in person, okay,
wow.
But that doesn't count, right? So you said covered him, and that to me means you saw him many times, multiple times. Unfortunately, I rarely saw Bernard King or Reggie White. I wasn't covering Tennessee when those two played. If I had been, I'd put them in that category of the best I've ever seen, but I didn't see them. So I've got Dale Carter, Carl Pickens, Justin Gatlin, Heath Schuler, and one other I need to mention is Eric Berry. I thought he was a great athlete.
Absolutely. Probably the best player that I covered, I would say as a whole. I mean, I hate to take anything away from some of those 98 guys. That was the first year I covered Tennessee. I'm because of what they did, but you know, Eric Berry would have starred on that team as well, which is saying something. Oh, yeah. General Ursus says going way back, Stanley Morgan. Steve says Deion Grant. I'll give you one that I think has flown under the radar. And do you remember when they had the first 2 days of fall camp were all freshmen?
Yes.
Okay.
And I like that, actually.
I did too. I thought it was very smart. And of course, the NCAA, Mark Emmert got rid of it. So anyway, but I'm not sure if it's him. But Jabari Greer goes out there, and here he is, probably what, 185 pounds out of high school, maybe 180, somewhere in there, I'm guessing. And he goes through the drills, and he's fast. And he does these little the shuttle drills. And then Kevin Burnett comes up 40 pounds heavier and has faster feet than him. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I think that Kevin Burnett, you know, he had injury issues. He ended up being a very good pro, but I look back and I'm just kind of picking out a dark horse of a guy that I was like, that guy's cut from a different cloth than even the dudes he's playing with at Tennessee.
Yeah, that's not one I would have thought of.
Yeah. I'm totally dark horse and just out there. But
I'll give you one that was huge for his position, and he ran a 4.33 in the 40, which I never thought would ever happen. That's Jamal Lewis.
Yeah. I've said before, and people have probably heard me say this. What was his final year at Tennessee, Jimmy?
99.
Okay. It would then I don't think it would have. So he was drafted in 2000.
Correct.
Okay. So it would have been for you. I was at his pro day when I was working with Jimmy, and I've said before, you can't really tell with your eyeballs a big difference between a 4.3 and 4.5. But when a man that's 200 and I think he was 232 pounds did it, you're like, I mean, I remember my mouth dropping open. I was like, that was really, really fast. And his family knew it too. Nobody waited for the clocks or the time. His family just was like, they'd hit the lottery. They just, yay, they were up in the concourse. And that's the one time I've watched a 40. I was like, holy cow, that's fast.
Yeah. And to see, look, there haven't been, I think there are 9 players in NFL history that have had a 2,000-yard season. He's one of them. He was actually a better pro than I thought he would be. He was a fantastic pro, won a Super Bowl ring, and had really an outstanding career in the NFL that was cut short by injury. Dave, by the way, with the podcast that I've been doing, I had a chance to interview him several weeks ago, and the comparisons between him and Jim Brown are amazing. Amazing.
Such as?
Well, first off, Jim Brown was born in Georgia. So was Jamal Lewis. Jim Brown was a rookie of the year in the NFL, and Jamal Lewis was the offensive rookie of the year. Jim Brown won one NFL championship. Jamal Lewis won one Super Bowl. Each of them ran for over 10,000 yards in their career. Each of them retired after 9 years as a pro, which was another thing that I found interesting. And both of them were big backs. Jim Brown was a, quote, fullback. Jamal Lewis in high school was a fullback. So I just thought those similarities between those two. And I had no clue about this when I went in to do the interview with Jamal. But I said, by the way, I said, here's Jim Brown from Georgia. He played for the Browns. Your last 2 years were with the Browns. You both played 9 years. And he said, that was my hero. That's who I looked up to. And we forged a great relationship when I played for the Browns. Now, the Browns initially became the Ravens, and then they restarted the Browns franchise, right?
Right.
So it was when the reborn Browns is when Jamal Lewis and Jim Brown became big buddies. But, yeah, if you look at those numbers, and I'm not saying Jamal Lewis is as good as Jim Brown, don't get me wrong, but the similarities between them. Oh, and by the way, Jim Brown set an NFL single-season rushing record, okay? Well, Jamal Lewis did as well. It is a rookie. I think he had the rookie record, but they each set an NFL record for rushing yards in a season, or maybe it was yards per game in a season. But there were just a lot of similarities between those two.
Yeah, and tell us about what you're doing. Elias had a good one. Sean Bryson, probably not the lateral that you would want, but a size-speed ratio straight ahead, I would say he was right up at the top of the list. Tell us about what you're doing on the YouTuber there with the full exposure there. It's fantastic, great stuff.
Well, thanks. We call it the rewind because I'm looking back in history. We've interviewed at least 15 players. We started with Roy Kramer, or sports personalities. Our most recent one is Bob Kessling, and that's going to be launching here at 1 o'clock today. But we've gone back and done a lot of these interviews with players, whether it was Heath Schuler, Jeff Francis, Keith DeLong, Jamal Lewis, Fred White. We've talked to a lot of them. We've branched out to Holly Warlick, who was denied playing in the Olympics in 1980. We talked to her about that because it was an Olympic year. Ben Testerman, the greatest junior tennis player in history, and from Knoxville, we've interviewed him. So it's mostly football, but we've branched out to other sports, and we launch those each Thursday. And I've really enjoyed it because with every interview that I've done, I've learned something about that person that I did not know. And hopefully with people that watch these interviews, they will learn something. It's called The Rewind on Full Disclosure Productions. If you go to YouTube and you have trouble finding it because there are a lot of full disclosures on there, if you type in my name, all these interviews will pop up. So we hope that you'll check it out. We've had a really good time interviewing them.
Yes.
And thanks for giving me an opportunity to plug it.
I would suggest anybody include Jimmy's name with full disclosure, because you don't want to show up on an OnlyFans account or something like that. Work Trucks, all about trucks, but Paige does a fantastic job as well. She's got a ton of coverage out there. Work Trucks, all about trucks, right place, right time. Work Trucks with an X, LLC.com. All about trucks that are actually available. Trucks that help you maximize your profits by having the right work vehicle. Now, time is money. The perfect work vehicle doesn't break down, has all the space to carry what you need. That's what Work Trucks is intent on offering, while other dealerships just can't do it. Contracting about time. Work Trucks saves you time with less back and forth trips and trucks that pass the highest standards to be put to work. The process is quick and easy when choosing a vehicle for Work Trucks. Cargo vans, utility body trucks with an AppHide, work bodies installed, pickup trucks of all sizes, and anything special, cranes, dump trucks. If you're a contractor, you need to know Work Trucks. That's a fact. Service industry, Work Trucks. The trucks that your business has to have. You need Work Trucks. Clinton Highway in Knoxville, downtown Birmingham with an X. WorkTrucksLLC.com. Proud supporters of the Tennessee Vols. A couple of housekeeping issues, so to speak, on our message board before we get to our next topic. And that is, have you heard by chance if Amari Jefferson, I don't think this will come up till next year because he had the hip surgery, but how intent, we've talked to him on this show, do you think he is on playing baseball? Or I guess more, Jimmy, I don't know if you've spoken to him before, but I guess from Tennessee side, how open would they be to that? Because I think we're kind of at the day and age, and I hate to say it, where you have to specialize at some point. I think 18 is a good time to do it.
It's going to be very difficult for him, in my opinion, to play baseball at Tennessee as well. And it goes back to something that you and I talked about earlier in the show. If you're a wide receiver, there is a ton of reading that you have to do in regard to what the defense is doing. That's one reason, in my opinion, that Tennessee does not have that many wide receivers that are productive the first year they come to Tennessee in the Josh Heupel system, because it's a very, very difficult position to play based on all the reads that you have to make. So I would be very surprised if his first year that he plays baseball, because he's going to have to learn the position of wide receiver. After he learns that position, maybe he can then help him on the baseball diamond. But the first year, I would be really surprised if he does that.
Unsung with a good one, too. Elijah Simmons, over 300 pounds. Again, injuries have sidelined his career, but it wouldn't surprise me if he can stay healthy, if he has a solid career, given his ability at the next level. I just think his potential was unfulfilled in Knoxville.
Yeah, I agree with that. And part of it was the injuries. I think part of it was he got too heavy as well. But yeah, I think he does. I remember when he signed with Tennessee, there were a lot of people that were excited about it because he was such a big guy who could move and had athletic ability. And for a variety of reasons, he's not fulfilled that at Tennessee, but that doesn't mean he won't be able to go to the next level and be a nice player.
He reminds me, and always has, of one of my good friends when it comes to size speed ratio. And here I am walking around a restaurant trying to find the restroom, and I look up, and Jimmy Hyams has written about this guy, and they've got I sent you the picture if you remember this. Rudy Stinson at Powell, he was the defensive tackle. Jimmy covered the Austin East game. I will still say this is the greatest sporting event I ever went to. And I say that because Powell had been beaten by Austin East. A lot of my friends were on the team. They'd been beat by Austin East every year. And finally, in 1991, which I graduated in 92, they beat Austin East. That helped them advance to the semifinals and end up making it to the state. But you wrote about that team all those many years. I'm like, that's insane. I was, I was an 18 or 17-year-old goofball out there in the stands. But all right, we've got a lot to get to. Sorry to get sidetracked there, but that was a pretty neat moment. And Rudy, rest in peace. We're always thinking about you. His son's already through college, I believe, and has played college ball as well. But
I thought Rudy Stinson was one of the best defensive tackles that Powell had until Walter Nolan came around.
I would say yes, that is the best. I'd say those are the best too. And well, if you go back to offensive linemen, you could probably, there's John Bruin, there's Daryl Smith, there's a lot of good ones. But defensive linemen, yes, I would say those are the two best in my lifetime. I still remember Rudy. Bear with me for a second. He was going to go to Tennessee, but it didn't work out. He ended up passing away. So he wanted to go to I remember him saying, this is when he was probably 270, 280. We were freshmen, and he was only 5'10", 5'11". He wasn't that tall. And he said, I could dunk if I could rip the ball. I was like, Rudy, no, you can't. There's no way. He said, give me that volleyball. And he could palm a volleyball, and he just jumped up and dunked it. I'd never seen anybody dunk in person. And here he is, 270 pounds. I quickly realized that that covering sports would be a much better idea for me than playing them. In 2 minutes, we're going to dig into the SEC and Big Ten, discussing 4 automatic bids. What would Jimmy Hyams do to fix the college football playoff, or does it need fixing? And now revenue sharing is triggering massive layoffs at Indiana. Is this coming to colleges across the country? I think so. Hang tight 2 minutes as we broadcast live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. truly Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com. Dave Hooker here for Dynasty Pools and Spas, your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing, therapeutic, absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount, Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. Dynasty Pools and Spas.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Neubert Collision Center.
With our brand new location on Emory Road, Eye Care Optical is bringing East Tennessee's best eye care to your neighborhood. Doctors Johnston and Combs offer unmatched expertise and care without a trip to Knoxville. Eye Care
Frank, like the name, but serious or something. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun, represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
Alrighty, welcome back with Jimmy Hyams sitting in for Caleb Calhoun, who I think is somewhere over like Oklahoma right now, which would make him, if he's he's somewhere over Oklahoma, that would probably make him the smartest football mind in there with Brent Venables. No, got Stoops running around. So, Jimmy, what did you think of the college football playoff year #1? There were going to be issues. Just as an overall feel, I kind of felt a little bit let down. I don't know if I had my expectations too high, but I know you pushed for a playoff for a long, long time, as have I. What did you make of it?
Well, several things. One, as far as the selection committee, I did not like the idea that they did not value strength of schedule. So that was one take. The other take was there weren't that many good games. There were blowouts, and I think in part it's because they rewarded teams that had a good record, but didn't necessarily have a great team. The other thing is I don't like the seeding process. I think they need to change that. I'll have a suggestion on that, but I think they need to change the seeding process. But to me, there were very few compelling games. Texas and Arizona State was one of them. Now, some of the games, like I thought were compelling, you might say, well, that was a 2-score game. I thought Notre Dame, Georgia was compelling just because I didn't know what was going to happen with Georgia's quarterback, Gunnar Stockton. Okay. Then you have the national championship game. It's 31-7, but Notre Dame gets right back in it. And so in the fourth quarter, if they stop a 3rd and 11 by Ohio State, they got a shot. So, but there were very few games that I thought were compelling, that were outstanding, that were well played. And I was overall a little bit disappointed in that. And I was also disappointed in the seeding process, which I think they need to revisit.
Okay, you were talking about a change that you would make earlier. Go ahead and throw that out there. If it was Commissioner Hyams of the NCAA, or maybe it would be president of ESPN, whatever the case may be, whoever controls this thing, what changes would you make after what you saw in year 1?
Well, I'm not giving automatic bids and top 4 seeding to conference champions that don't deserve it. If you're the conference champion and you're ranked 14th in the country, you're not getting a top 4 seed. I would yield to this. I wouldn't mind going top 2 seeds because I think that's easier to identify the top 2. I would also expand not to 14 teams, but to 16 teams, because I don't like some teams having a bye right off the bat. Now,
that part in particular, it makes no sense. I could see it in other sports, but a game like football, and which is so physical, the exposure to injury, the wear and tear, the bye made no sense from the get to me.
Well, and also, if I'm not mistaken, didn't each of the conference champions that had an automatic bye, didn't all of them lose the first round game?
Yep.
So what good did that bye do you?
Nothing. And it also on the flip,
bye, you went bye-bye.
Yeah. To your point, you got 2 byes. To your point, Jimmy, it takes you out of a rhythm as well. So I don't know which is worse, what I laid out with playing more or playing less, but it's just not conducive to good football.
No, and so that would be one of the changes. But I would go to 16 so that everybody plays the first round. And I'm a little bit surprised that there's a push for 14. And you say, well, why is that a surprise? Because I think the SEC and the Big Ten want to gobble up as many spots as they can get. And if you add 2 more spots on top of the 14, if you go to 16, that's 2 more opportunities for the SEC or the Big Ten to have teams in the playoffs, which is millions of dollars for each team and conference if you get in there. So it would be one, helping the SEC and the Big Ten, which is why I think they'll go to 16. And the other one is you would do away with anybody getting a first round bye. The third thing I would do is not have a seeding process where if you're Arizona State and you win your conference and you rank 12th in the college football standings, that you are seeded number 4 or 3. I don't, or Boise State. I don't like that. So I hope they do away with that.
I would just absolutely strip it down. I wouldn't have the committee, which to me is a television show to sell advertising on. I would have a BCS formula. I don't care if you could compute it and have an idea of what it's going to be on a Sunday morning. I'd take the human element out of it. And the seeding would consist of this. Pretty simple. 16-1, 15-2, 14-3. Now, you're saying the 16 is going to get hammered by the 1. I get that, but I think I get something better out of the 7-8. The 6 would be 6-9, and then the 5-10. I think I would get quality games out of that, so I think that would offset it.
I think that it would. And by the way, your 16th seed has a better chance of beating the 1 seed than it would in an NCAA men's basketball tournament. How many 16 seeds have beaten a 1 seed in the men's basketball tournament?
I think it's 1.
Okay. So you got a better chance of being the 16 seed in football beating the 1 seed.
Yeah, but it feels a little like Dumb and Dumber. You know that movie where he goes, so you're saying there's a chance. I just don't.
Hey, well, Michigan beat Ohio State.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay. I will say it's more likely. I never thought I would say this. It's more likely in football than basketball because it's just practically never happened except for once in basketball.
So now I do think we'll still see probably some buyouts and some blowouts. I'm sorry. And the second round games will probably be a lot better, a lot more compelling than some of the first round games. But if you got 1 playing 16, you'll have 9 playing 8, 10 playing 7, etc. Those should be good games. They should be. You don't know, but they should be.
Bank on It, brought to you by Commercial Bank. Jimmy, do you believe that we'll get to 16 this year, soon, or just eventually? Bank on It, brought to you by Commercial Bank.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial.
All right, Jim. He's back. Jim, when do you think we'll get to 16? I get Bank on It, brought to you by Commercial Bank.
It can't be this year because it's a 2-year contract.
Right.
So I think in 2026.
Okay.
Now it may go to 14, and I'm not in favor of that, but I do think it's not going to stay at 12 beyond this year, in my opinion. it's going to expand. And the first opportunity to expand is 2026. And so while I keep reading 14, I've also heard 16 from some people for the reasons we just mentioned earlier. Nobody gets a bye, and it's a very easy bracket to fill out. Everybody plays. So that makes a lot more sense to me than going to 14. But I think it'll be expanded in 2026 to either 14 or 16.
Any chance they could tear up a contract? And I know these contracts need to be ironclad for a lot of different reasons, but when they decided to get moving on stuff, they just suddenly move, and like NIL, transfer portal, the playoffs. You don't think there's any chance they could tear up a contract and do something before this season?
No, I don't. I think it's a hardline contract, and you've got all these deals that are set up with the Vols and with the ESPN. They've been signed out for several years about who's going to be hosting what. I mean, I shouldn't say several years, but well in advance. So the Vols that are going to be hosting playoff games for this year, they're not going to give in on this stuff. And I don't think that there's going to be a lot more money to be divvied up all of a sudden. So I would be shocked. I would be shocked if they tear up the contract this year and expand. I think it'll be a 12-team playoff in 2025.
Jimmy sitting in for Jimmy Hyams, Hall of Famer, sitting in for Caleb Calhoun, who is visiting family. Caleb will be back with us tomorrow. Jimmy's appearance brought to you in part by Double D Piping.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beat. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping.
All right, Jimmy, which of those changes, if you could only pick one, would you, the changes you made, which would you most want to see? What would you mandate? And then I want to get your thoughts on automatic bids.
I go to 16.
Okay.
That would be number one. I could deal with some of the other issues, but I would go to 16 just to make it more balanced. And so that would be the change that I would recommend most highly.
What are your thoughts in general on the automatic bids? Because now there's talk that the SEC and Big Ten could get 4 automatic bids.
I don't think that they should have that in there. I think that your automatic bid goes to your conference champion, and then it's based on merit. So I mean, in a given year, the Big Ten may only have 3 teams that deserve to be in there. I don't think they should put a 9-3 Big Ten team in there that had a strength of schedule of 85 into the playoff. So I don't like the idea of going 4 automatic qualifiers for the conferences. And obviously they're just trying to make more money or not. They're trying to guarantee more money, but I'm not a fan of that. I would not do that. I would pick the most deserving. Now, in a given year, you may have the most deserving out of 16 might be 4 from the SEC and 4 from the Big Ten. Heck, it might be 6 from the SEC and 5 from the Big Ten would be the most deserving. But I wouldn't give 4 automatic bids to either conference.
Completely agree. I go back to just strip it down. It's not like the SEC or Big Ten are ever going to be short of having teams in a top 16. They're going to have a minimum of 3, Jimmy, and probably 4, which is what they're pushing for. It's kind of just let the process play out. But they just seem darn determined not to do that.
Well, help me if I think I'm right about this, just off the top of my head. So in the 12-team playoff, the SEC had 3 teams, okay? Mm-hmm. If there had been, it was Texas, Georgia, and Tennessee. If you'd had a 16-team playoff, the SEC would have had 6. Because Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina were all in the top 16 of the final ranking.
See, but here's why I hate the committee so much. I think that while you're right, they would manipulate that in order to have an even number. I mean, to me, the committee's the catch-all. There's
what do you mean an even number?
I think that
the same number from the SEC and the Big Ten. Is that what you mean?
I think they would. I think they would try to do that. If it got to, I think it may be blatantly obvious in some situations, some years where you can't do it. But I think
this would have been one of them. You can't find a fifth Big Ten team that was deserving. But anyway, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. And to me, the committee is the catch-all. So you don't need these automatic bids and everything. At the end of the day, you pick up the bat phone and you call the committee and you say, yeah, we really need that Indiana in there, or whoever you need in there. They're the catch-all. I don't understand why you have to have all these rules. I don't like that they're a catch-all. Don't get me wrong, but they're the catch-all.
The committee is?
Yes. I mean, if anything doesn't go your way in the seating process and you're the Big Ten or the SEC, you just call the committee chair.
Yeah. And I don't think the committee chair should represent the Big Ten or the SEC.
I agree. I agree.
Blatant conflict of interest.
I completely agree, but they shouldn't, but I think they probably do.
Well, they did this last year, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Ward Manuel is going to be the chairman again this year, right? Isn't it? I think it's at least, well, I'm not 100% sure of that. I know they're like, quote, term limits on committee members, and it flips over. Like every 3 years, you get 3 years on it, and then you're off. And so when people say they set a precedent, no, they didn't. Because the committee that's in place now may be very different from the committee 2 or 3 years down the road. So they could have a different viewpoint of strength of schedule or anything else. So it's not like they're setting precedent. If you had the same 13 every year, then you could say, yes, this is a precedent that they set. But you rotate on and off the committee. It's like a jury.
Yeah.
A different jury at different times will have different results. So that's why you'll continue, in my opinion, to see inconsistencies with the results from this committee.
The story, I've only known one. Have you ever served jury duty?
Yes.
Okay, I never have. But John Adams, our friend who will rejoin us, I think, next week, whenever he gets back from one of his many vacations, I remember him telling me about serving on a jury one time. He said, yeah, it was a murder trial. I said, you convict him? He goes, yeah. I said, did he do it? He goes, I think so. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. He goes, it was one of them. All right, hang tight. We're in the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, again, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. banksandjones.com. Dave Hooker here for Dynasty Pools and Spas. Your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing? Therapeutic? Absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount, Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. Dynasty Pools and Spas.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we're still trying to live up to that.
Joe Neubert Collision Center.
With our brand new location on Emory Road, Eye Care Optical is bringing East Tennessee's best eye care to your neighborhood. Doctors Johnston and Combs offer unmatched expertise and care without a trip to Knoxville. Eye Care Optical.
Waste of time, like bringing a married guy to Vegas.
Then there's this guy, the Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com, Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer, Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
A rejoin. When's the last time you've been to Vegas, Jimmy?
How many times have I been?
When's the last time?
Oh, last time it was in the 1980s. I've been there twice.
Yeah, I got stuck.
Hey, I'm going in March.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Oh, what do you go out there for? Because there's different Vegases. You can do spa Vegas, you can do show Vegas, you can do drinking Vegas, you can do gambling Vegas. What's your Vegas? A little bit of everything.
Well, the first time I went, I did a little bit too much drinking Vegas, and I bet, and I went into the played blackjack, craps, and all this stuff, and I ended up I reached my limit of how much I would lose. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The second time I went, both these are in the 1980s. I said, I'm going to be a little bit smarter. I'm going to bet on sporting events. And I easily paid for my trip.
Nice.
So, now, this time I'm going because my daughter's celebrating her 30th birthday. She wants to do it in Vegas. She lives in New York, so we're flying out to Vegas. We're going to also go to the Grand Canyon and do some other things. But it's going to be a celebration of my daughter's 30th birthday.
That'll be fun. Last time I went to Vegas, I was supposed to meet a friend who was a marketing person with a boat company. And we were supposed to spend like 5 days on Lake Mead. So the idea was we were going to do a weekend of Vegas, go to Lake Mead, get away from all that, and come back to another weekend of Vegas, right? Great idea. She got fired 2 weeks before, so we spent 9 days in Vegas. And you don't ever want to spend 9 days in Vegas. I will never go back because of that trip. I remember sitting there thinking, I will never step foot in this city again. You don't need 9 days.
No, you don't. Well, in this trip, we're going to do several things: Vegas, Death Valley, Zion Park, Grand Canyon. We're going to be out there for 9 days.
Oh, not okay. But you're doing the right 9 days.
Yeah, we're only going to do about 2 days in Vegas.
Yep. Okay. You're going to have some clarity for 9 days. All right. So you have, I want to change gears here for a moment. You have a situation where layoffs have been triggered at Indiana because of essentially revenue sharing. And for those that don't know, what's going to happen, and correct me if you see this any differently, Jimmy, is NIL collectives, which essentially, to be totally transparent, I am one because we paid Cooper Mays and Jacob Warren to be a part of the Vol reports with city heating and air conditioning. So they're going to go away the way I see it, Jimmy, and the schools are going to absorb that, and they're going to essentially make the payments, and it's just going to go through the school. Is that how you see it?
Not really.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to completely go away. Now, I don't think they'll be able to raise the money that they used to because those donations are going to go directly to the school. But let's just take Tennessee, for example. They have a Boost Her Club. I think they're going to continue that to help pay for women athletes.
Okay.
I don't think Spire Sports is going away. But just pick a number. If they raise $15 million a year, I think that number may be closer to $5 million because they won't be able to get the sponsorship money that is now going to go directly to the school, in my opinion. So they will play a much lesser role, but I don't think they'll completely go away.
I think they'll get to the point where their impact is nil. I mean, they may be around. I may approach a guy, but I know that Spire, when a lot of the people, well, like me, started cutting deals with players outside of their purveyance, they adjusted their contracts to be exclusive. So I think that for the uneducated, you'll have prospects that'll sign exclusive contracts with a school. Now, they probably shouldn't do that, but at 17, who's going to turn down a deal for, $100,000 if you say it's exclusive? That would be my contention. So I think they'll eventually be somewhat nil. But when I look at bringing that in-house, I think Tennessee has a really solid athletic department. And I think there's some athletic departments out there that have probably gotten really big, let's say Indiana, obviously with what they did in football this year, that I wouldn't feel as comfortable as a fan handling bringing in NIL. If I'm a Tennessee fan or an Alabama fan or most of the schools out there, Georgia, I wouldn't say Florida because they had the Jaden Rashada issue. I feel really good about where Tennessee's athletic department is in being able to handle such a massive shift.
I do too. They just had a budget that they released for $234 million. I think they hit the 200 million threshold 3 years ago. Now they're up to 234 million. I remember in 1990, I did a story about all budgets in the SEC. 1990, Tennessee's budget was in the middle of the pack. It was a 10-team conference. They were in the middle of the pack at $22 million in 1990. Now we're at $234 million. Now, interestingly, their expenses were about $233 million. So
right.
They don't show much of a profit. And a lot of that is earmarked toward renovation of stadiums, baseball stadium, football stadium, et cetera. So a lot of it's already earmarked somewhere. And of course, a lot of it goes to coaches' salaries.
Yeah, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that the reason they spend about what they bring in is that they can't show a profit.
No, they can show a profit.
Okay.
Yeah, and they can put it in the surplus. I remember when Dave Hart got to Tennessee, he told me that their reserve fund was $1.9 million. Do you know what Alabama's reserve fund was when he came to Tennessee? $100 million.
Wow. I was going to guess maybe 10 or 20.
Yeah, 100 million is what he told me. So, yeah, you can take the profit and put it into reserve fund in case you have to fire a coach and pay him $40 million.
You know, Dave Hart's never going to be appreciated because of the Lady Ball thing, and that was absolutely stupid. But you had to have a hatchet guy. I mean, they had dudes running around making 150, 200 grand. I had no idea what they did in the athletic department.
Yeah.
So do you think there'll be more of that, more house cleaning, or is a school like Tennessee able to bring in the NIL and able to operate that with who they have on board right now?
I think there'll be more people doing what Indiana did, and that was to lay off 25 employees. Now, none of them were coaches. None of them were assistant to the coach. They didn't cut any sports, but you're going to see sports getting cut. It's going to happen because some of them don't have enough money to pay 20 to 23 million or whatever it's going to be in this revenue sharing. So you're going to see a lot of these non-revenue, non-productive sports. It might be men's golf, men's tennis. And it's going to be men's sports. It's not going to be women's sports, but you're going to see a lot of men's sports get cut. Or you might cut 3 men's sports and cut 2 women's sports, but it's going to happen. They're going to pare it down because of the revenue sharing. I guarantee you. And they're going to continue to, and I noticed where Indiana is cutting their compliance department. Who needs compliance? There are no rules, right?
True.
What the heck?
That's very true. There are no rules. So yeah, who needs compliance? What are the most sacred sports at Tennessee? Because there was a time that I would have said track and field back when we worked together. I mean, Tennessee was one of the best track and field teams and groups or whatever you call it in the nation. So what are the most coveted ones? Obviously football, men's and women's basketball, baseball. Now I know you cover a lot of tennis. What are some other sports that are most coveted, do you think, to the University of Tennessee fan base?
The only other one is softball.
Yeah, I left them out.
That's it. I went to some softball games. There were over 2,000 people at those softball games. It may not sound like a lot, but that's a whole lot more than 300 that would go to a tennis match.
Yep.
So to me, they're 5, and that's it. Every other one. Now I'll say this: I did go to a volleyball match too. In my retirement, I was mixing and matching and going to different. And there were over 2,000 for a volleyball match at Tennessee at Thompson Bowling Arena. That impressed me. It was more than I would have anticipated. But they're only, as you said, sacred sports are only 5. Everybody else could be expendable, in my opinion.
Wow. I can't imagine Tennessee not having a track and field team. I can't imagine. And I know that you and I've never really talked tennis, but I respected that sport, even though it's not a revenue generator. I can't imagine Tennessee not having tennis. I can't imagine Tennessee not having crew, which to me, you have to wrestle with the whole Title IX issue because you could drop crew tomorrow and nobody's going to lose any sleep over it except for the athletes that lose their scholarship. But then you would have to offset it with a men's sport.
The reason they added crew instead of gymnastics or equestrian, one, it wasn't nearly as expensive. And secondly, you could have more than 20 people on scholarship. So it was a numbers thing. You could have more women on scholarship in rowing than you could in some of these other sports. So that's the reason they went in that direction. And as you know, the SEC doesn't have rowing. So they've been members of the Big East or the Big 10 or whatever else, the Big 12 for a while. So, but that's why they added that particular sport. Now, I love tennis, but it's not revenue producing. I love golf. It's not revenue producing. So I don't know which one would be, quote, most expendable. I mean, I remember when I came to Knoxville in 1985, they just dropped wrestling. They just dropped it. They had a wrestling program that was actually pretty good, and they dropped it. So I don't think Tennessee's going to have to do that. But the Indianas of the world, maybe Vanderbilt, maybe some other programs that don't generate the revenue that Tennessee does, even within the SEC, maybe it's Ole Miss, Mississippi State. I think you're going to see sports being dropped because they won't be able to afford to have them because of the revenue share.
The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios. Jimmy, we greatly appreciate you being a part and filling in for Caleb Calhoun. Tell us about what you've got going on. It's a lot, and you and Paige are doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, the main thing is doing these interviews that we're calling it the Rewind. We've been able to do at least 15 or 16 interviews so far. I did see somebody that was on your text line that said, "Hey, I watched that Robert Peace interview where he married Philip Fulmer's daughter. I really like that one." So, but we've had a bunch of them. Our most recent one, we're launching Bob Kessling today at 1:00. And I've really had a good time. It's mostly football players, but we've had Roy Kramer, we've had a tennis player, we've had an administrator on. So we try to get compelling interviews and look back at their stories, their history. And so we've had a lot of fun with it. Our Jamal Lewis interview, the first time we launched, it got 35,000 views. So we were really pleased with that. And that's on our Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter. And then on YouTube as well. So you can find us on YouTube. If you Google my name on YouTube, these interviews will pop up. So we've had a really good time doing that. And I appreciate all those that have taken the time to watch.
I'm still very surprised that Elon Musk just didn't name it Musk or Elon. I mean, I don't know why he went with X, but he did. All right, Jimmy, thank you very much. I will see you at lunch tomorrow, sir.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Again, the show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com, broadcasting from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios, East Tennessee's largest Ford and Lincoln volume dealer. The buying experience is perfected. I'm Dave.